Did you know that penguins mate for life? Some will find a mate when they're as young as 5 years old, and they sometimes live for 20 to 30 more years. Meanwhile, a praying mantis female will kill a male after mating. She'll eat his head, which, by the way, gives her the nutrition she needs to feed her young. As for us humans, we're just trying to get our divorce rate below 45%.
That's great, Mike, but I was asking about your embezzlement charges.
And I told you before that my boss has encouraged me to write off kickbacks. Go ahead and ask him yourself. It's just the way things are done, especially when you're trying to fund a movie podcast.
Well, as long as we're putting the money to good use. Embezzle away. Just don't tell anyone about it, okay?
The secret will stay right here on the Filmographers podcast, the show where we study a director's entire career one film at a time. I'm Michael Moreci.
And I'm Keir Graff. In our first season, we're turning the spotlight on Steven Soderbergh, one of Hollywood's most fascinating and versatile directors. We're discussing why each of his films succeeded or failed, always looking at them in the context of the Hollywood landscape at the time they were released.
We are now well past the halfway mark, practically cruising through Soderbergh's robust and eclectic filmography. And hey, if you've enjoyed our deep and thoroughly researched dive into Soderbergh's career, please be sure to give us a review or rating on your podcast of choice or subscribe to our YouTube channel. It costs absolutely nothing, just a few moments of your time, and helps us immensely.
We're an independent, self-financed venture here. No embezzlement opportunities whatsoever. And the simple act of helping our visibility through ratings, reviews, and good word of mouth goes a long, long way. So do it now.
We want to keep doing this show for many years and many seasons, and you can help us get there. Speaking of the show, Keir, as is our custom, kick us off with your one-sentence summary of Soderbergh's 2009 film, The Informant.
In the early 90s, in Decatur, Illinois, a sexy time and place, agribusiness executive Mark Whitaker snitches to the FBI on his employer's price-fixing scheme in order to cover up his own escalating misdeeds, all under the misapprehension that when he takes down his own company, he'll be the last man standing and the only logical choice for CEO.
I love it. It's such a great way to describe that. Like, there's so much going on, and you distill it really well. And I want to commend you for saying about Decatur, Illinois, a sexy time and place. They gloss over in the Informant that was once known around that time, and I think even a little further, as the meth capital of Illinois.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I don't know who.
Some sexy smiles in Decatur.
Yeah, I don't know who elected them, but they were the meth. Decatur was the meth capital of Illinois. Yeah. So
sorry, Decatur. That's no good.
You got meth and Mark Whitaker. That's
raw end of the deal. But you got some jobs through Archer Daniels Midland.
It's still around today, as far as I know.
I believe so.
Yeah, no embezzlement scheme can keep any corporation down for too long.
No, like they say in the movie. We're looking at a few years of, lawyers doing their thing, some suspended sentences. No big deal.
No big deal. So speaking of how it's the attitude towards everything that's going on in this movie, the first thing that I want to dive into is the tone of the movie, because it's unusual in a good way, I would argue, but unusual nonetheless, because most people who've seen the movie or are familiar with it likely know that it's based on a true story. While the story in The Informant focuses on Mark Whitaker, played by Matt Damon, as he blows the whistle on his company's lysine price fixing, the scandal out beyond that was a huge deal. Like, I don't remember it personally, but, I was like 14 years old at the time, but like the global price fixing scheme that Whitaker uncovered, like it involved the FBI, the Justice Department, and it impacted the lives of millions of people around the world. Like, I'm not going to pretend to know the ins and outs. It's very complicated. The book that was written about it, which I'm sure we'll discuss, was hundreds of pages long. It's a massive book. But through doing a little bit of research, I know that this was a big deal. It was serious business. And Whitaker himself, the man at both the heart of the scandal and the movie, was found guilty of embezzlement. He likely committed corporate espionage, was in prison, And he discovered throughout this entire process, which stretched many years, that he suffered from severe mental health issues. And yet, the movie is a comedy. It's hilarious, in fact. So, Keir, explain.
I love this movie so much. And in almost any other director's hands, well, maybe Mike Nichols or Martin Brest could have pulled it off, it would have come off as more of a corporate thriller. Maybe, in fact, like The Firm, a movie Whitaker was apparently obsessed with. Part of its success is the way everyone, from Matt Damon to Scott Bakula to Joel McHale to the wonderful Melanie Linsky, plays it straight. The straight-facedness is even more remarkable when you realize the film is largely cast with comedians, with everyone from Tony Hale to Patton Oswalt to Andy Daly making an appearance. But everyone seemed to understand the assignment. Damon is just top-notch. His internal monologue, which you parodied at the top of the show, is worth the price of admission. He's just so random, but he's also outwardly always focused on the task at hand, which is usually evading, obfuscating, or doing damage control. And the more I think about it, it's almost like Damon is playing both the funny man and the straight man. The tone is just perfect, and it's hard to explain. It's one of those things you can't dissect. Did you know they still don't really know how cats purr? It's probably because you can't dissect a live cat, and a dead cat can't purr. And why do cats purr, but dogs don't?
I think what is that? Is that a Whitakerian? Whitakerism?
It's a Whitakerism, yeah.
Whitakerism.
Yeah. Yeah, I just loved I watching the movie, I just loved those digressions. It's played for comic effect, but in a way, it's kind of like all of our minds do work like that a little bit, right? To varying degrees. We're often supposed to be present in one moment, and then we're kind of like, I wonder if anybody notices that like stain on my shirt or whatever. But his just tend to be a little more random and a little more tonally at odds with the situation in which he finds himself. Like he can be in a life or death situation going, I bet we could have fun fishing together, of an FBI agent.
Yeah. One day I can call him by his first name, I bet. It's kind of like, seems like an awful lot of thought for a polar bear.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it is. That voiceover is, I don't know how else to put it better, is worth the price of admission. It's so great. It's so funny. I think it catches you off guard because in the beginning it becomes more unhinged as it goes. Because in the beginning he's talking about corn and lysine. Yeah. Like it's like, oh, do you know what's in your breakfast, your morning cereal or your morning orange juice? Corn, lysine, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And you're like, oh, he's setting the stage. And then you realize like, no, this is the, an over hyperactive mind that, is, I think bipolar is what, but even I've read, so this is weird and we're going on a tangent already, but like I've read that even his bipolar disorder is like under scrutiny at least.
Well, I took from the movie that he probably he did forge the document stating that he was bipolar. However, I certainly can imagine him being bipolar because it seems like he has manic episodes. Mm-hmm. I didn't see the depressive ones so much, but again, haven't read the book. I can certainly see that. He does seem like maybe somebody who's got like ADHD or something because his mind is on overdrive all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's like, I can tell you, my older son has ADHD and it's so described so perfectly well to me that like their mind, it's like they take in so much of the world that it's like a fire hose trying to make its way through a straw.
Wow.
And
great analogy.
Yeah. And I think that's him. He's just going in so many directions. But I just found it interesting as I was poking around in like the actual Mark Whitaker story that like even the bipolar, because he did forge the medical document, but beyond that, it's still another like, is he bipolar? Right. I mean, he clearly has something and I'm not denying that, but it's just so interesting. It's another wrinkle of like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Like, what is this guy? Like you just can't pin him down.
Many layers of lies, and we have much more to say about that.
We have much more. So yeah, going back to, okay, we're talking about the very unique tone, very, very unique tone. Like it all comes down to the approach as far as I can tell. Soderbergh definitely could have made this into a serious drama. And he says that himself in the commentary track. But the thing is, The Insider already exists. He already made Aaron Brockovich, which it shares some similar DNA to The Informant, not a little bit, but both those films came out less than 10 years before the making of The Informant, and the impact of each, particularly Insider, which is specifically about whistleblowing, led Soderbergh to believe that the market on serious corporate whistleblower movies had just been cornered.
A Civil Action, starring John Travolta, also came out in 1998 and was sort of similar in terms of story, but that's assuming anyone cares about A Civil Action.
I don't see anyone mention it, but...
yeah, I mean, Civil Action is fine. I mean, we do like its director, Steven Zalian, who recently did Ripley for Netflix, which is excellent.
It was. We definitely kid. I mean, I think he also directed HBO's The Night Of, I think.
Which is really great. Love that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So anyway, that aside, getting back to why Soderbergh went with the light, screwballish tone for The Informant, there's two other factors at play, and both are worth mentioning and exploring. First and foremost, Soderbergh made this movie coming off of Che. Now, while The Girlfriend Experience came out first, The Informant was actually shot first. Being a smaller movie, The Girlfriend Experience had a quicker post-production and a faster track to release, so it beat The Informant to theaters. But going back to Che, anyone who listened to that episode knows that the making of that movie nearly broke Soderbergh. In a way, you can say it kind of did, because he retired, quote, retired, but at that time he was retired in 2013, just a few short years after making The Informant. And I think you can draw a pretty straight line from Che to his retirement. I don't think that's really up for, much debate. The point being, though, is Soderbergh didn't want to make a heavy movie. I would argue he probably didn't have it in him, but he still liked the potential for The Informant, and he liked it a lot. Scott C. Burns, who wrote The Informant based on Kurt Eichenwald's book, pitched it to Soderbergh's production company, Section 8, in 2001, right before Soderbergh was going off to shoot Solaris. Soderbergh hired Burns to write the movie based on his pitch, and his interest held over the next 7 years. So, coming out of Che, Soderbergh was looking for something fun, light, easier to shoot, and he found it in The Informant. And the second factor, which Soderbergh explains in the commentary track, is that at the story's heart, at Mark Whitaker's story's heart within this price-fixing scandal, but Whitaker's story itself, it's the perfect comedic setup. It's the escalating lie. It reminds me, actually, when I was watching the movie or rewatching it, it reminded me of one of Preston Sturges' great movies, one of my favorite Preston Sturges movie, The Miracle of Morgan's Creek. That one, I don't know if you've seen it, Keir. Have you seen that one?
I haven't. And I love Sturges. How have I not seen that? I don't know.
I don't know. I remember watching it. I just caught it at some month on the Criterion Channel when they were doing a Sturges spotlight.
Nice.
And it was included in there. It's definitely one of the lesser Sturges movies in terms of like how much people know it, but I should have looked this up. I don't know how it's accessible or if it's accessible on DVD, streaming, whatever. I just knew it from CriterionChannel.com. I don't know if it's on there anymore.
Yeah.
That movie, The Miracle of Morgan's Creek, is a madcap screwball comedy where a woman gets pregnant after a one-night stand with a departing troupe, which, by the way, crazy that they did this. I'm not sure if this is pre-code or not, or close or whatever, but in a few short years, there is no way that premise gets by.
Absolutely. That is pretty racy stuff for the time.
Unmarried one-night stand, doesn't know who the father is. She didn't even know who the guy was.
Yeah.
He left. It was shore leave.
And she doesn't die in the gutter?
At the end. So she tries to enlist her friend, played by the great Eddie Bracken, who's so good in this. Talk about anxious physical comedy. My God, he's so great. So anyway, she lists this guy to pass as the father, and the foundation is a lie, So, and everything just builds and builds from there. The circumstances just spiral out of control, and you have to double down on the lying, and the stakes get bigger. And that's just like The Informant, where just Whitaker can't stop lying.
There was always kind of a Billy Wilder aspect to this, and Matt was sort of a Jack Lemmon type figure, or at least I remember every once in a while I feel like, oh, this is kind of like one of those weird Billy Wilder comedies, you know.
Yeah, early on, I remember you had encouraged me to go watch The Knack by Richard Lester.
Right.
And so I went and watched a lot of Richard Lester movies, and I now understand that. Yeah.
Well, I think he always had a great sort of throwaway quality, which, you know, I very much wanted to duplicate. And as a result, like in this scene, this is a good example of, in almost every scene I'm running two cameras, because we were, you know, so, the whole movie was so performance oriented that I find, if you can, shooting two cameras and letting people play entire scenes out, always, you always get something better.
The escalating lie is a classic comic trope. Usually works. In literature, Whitaker would be called an unreliable narrator, which means what he's telling the reader or viewer doesn't match up with the truth. The reader or viewer spots small inconsistencies and begins to wonder what did or didn't really happen. Classic examples in literature are The Good Soldier by Ford Madox Ford and Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. In The Informant, at first we have no reason to doubt Whitaker, but we gradually grow suspicious. Many movies begin with an element of mystery and end with complete clarity, but here it's kind of the opposite. You know, Whitaker's exasperated FBI handlers learn there's more and more they don't know, and we even begin to wonder how well Whitaker has been able to keep track of his own fabulous tendencies.
Yeah, I mean, I have more to say on this, but actually, as you were saying, that makes me have a question for you, and I don't know anybody can definitively answer this, even Whitaker himself, but how much calculation do you think was in there? Or is it just that because you see him, he'll talk, not only will he lie, but he'll talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Is he just like on this train of like, hey, if I just throw enough out there and just say this and I say that, and I say it to here and say it to there, like I just confuse everybody enough that they're like, they just have to throw their hands up? Or is it just utter impulse that's like driving him?
I think that technique you mentioned feels to me like more of a Trump technique, which is like, I'm going to flood the zone with so much stuff that nobody can kind of respond to any of it. I see Whitaker as being a little more like that kind of paints himself into a corner and then tries to like cut a hole in the wall to get out of it or something. Like, I think he really is continually trying to solve the problem created by his last lie with a new lie, which then creates another problem. He's actually quite intelligent, but he seems to lack some crucial component of foresight, the ability to read the future or to see where his actions are going to lead. Some of the funniest sequences in the movie, you talked about his willingness to like talk to anybody. He couldn't keep a secret. Some of the funniest sequences in the movie are when he finally gets a good lawyer to represent him, played by Tony Hale, who's great straight man in this. I mean, he's so funny in other stuff, but like here, he's hilarious just by his reaction shots as he keeps discovering that his client, despite being ordered again and again, talk to nobody but your lawyers, is talking to everybody but his lawyers.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's the hilarious scene, one of my favorite Tony Hale reaction, where he's like, and maybe you can help me out here. I don't remember when he's got the plea deal for Mark.
Yeah.
And Mark, I forget what he says. And Tony Hale's just like, oh my God. He just like loses it finally. He's like, just take the deal.
Yeah, just take the deal. Like, you're not going to get anything better than this. And Whitaker's like, yeah, no, I think I'm getting new representation. Like, after all this painstakingly negotiated, like, yeah, this is the best you're going to get. And he's like, no, I think I can find somebody. And then of course he goes off and gets like bottom of the barrel
like
lawyer whose other clients are probably meth heads or something.
Maybe. Yeah, there's no shortage. But yeah, no, and I've known someone like this. I'll never forget. I knew somebody, and he was such a nice guy, and he's friends with friends I know, like, and I'm still kind of in contact with him. But like, I remember he would do stuff like this. I remember once, like, he would be like, we were all supposed to go out, and he there's the simple path, and guys like Whitaker and people who I think have this gene or whatever you want to call it in them won't do it. Like, we were supposed to all go out one night. I forgot what we were doing. And we're waiting for him. He doesn't show up. And eventually he calls and he's like, oh, guys, sorry, I am out buying a Benz. And we're like, dude, all you had to say was, I don't feel well. I got tied up at work. Something, because the next time I see you, you have to be in a fucking Benz.
He's like, what can I say that would be a good reason for me not to go out? Like something big enough that I can't make. Oh, yeah, I'm buying an extremely expensive car,
Right.
which I don't have and will never show up in.
Right. I mean, it's sort of a flex to say, hey, I can buy a Benz, but it's like, but now you need to be in a Benz, or now you have to lie again for why you didn't buy the Benz. And then, just like this cascading where it could just been like, hey man, I just don't feel really well. So I'm just stay home. But it's just like like you said, the perfect word, the fabulous.
So why didn't he buy the Benz?
Because he wasn't there. I wanted to share this though. In an interview with Sight and Sound, Soderbergh himself, he had the following to say about Mark Whitaker. This is a quote. What was intriguing about Mark Whitaker from the standpoint of making a movie was that typically you have an antagonist who is in conflict with some external force, another person or event. In this case, the external forces causing the conflict are created by Whitaker himself. So he's the protagonist and the antagonist. That made for a really interesting character. Keir, you actually pointed this out a bit earlier, and this seems to support your idea that Damon plays Whitaker, like you were saying, as both straight man and comic foil. Now, before we get to Damon's performance, Keir, I want to get your reaction to the movie, just the movie itself. Let's assume you haven't been spending months researching Soderbergh's life and career, and you just watched The Informant. What would you say about it?
I think I would say, wow, where's this movie been hiding? Because I'm not sure it's as widely known as it should be. I definitely know some people who really love this movie, but, it's not one of his best known films, really. But to actually answer this question, I can't pretend I haven't seen it before. Because when I did first see it, much closer to its original release, I liked it, but I wasn't blown away. And I think that's because it is a tone movie. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. I think at the time I was expecting something broader, more like a Coen Brothers movie. And while there are echoes of William H. Macy's Jerry Lundegaard in Damon's Whitaker, it's my deal, Wade. It's ultimately more controlled than that. So at the time I kind of said, oh, not bad. I kind of enjoyed it, and kind of forgot about it. But now rewatching it repeatedly for the podcast, yes, 3 times, I liked it more and more with each viewing. The seriousness with which this idiocy is played is just exquisite. And all of the details from Whitaker's ties to the Nagra recorder in the briefcase to Scott Bakula's character's haircut are just perfectly observed.
Yeah, and Bakula's haircut was like a specific choice that he made. Like it was just like he's gonna get an FBI haircut.
So good. So good.
Yeah, I love it. But I was similar to you. I guess in a way, I've definitely, I liked it a lot the first time I saw it, and I've grown to love it more. I watched it for the first time on a plane to Hawaii. It was in flight, it was probably either that or Ocean's 11. And I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. I love it even more now. And I remember watching it and not being able to believe how much I was enjoying it, because like you said, this isn't a movie that like really gets mentioned a ton. It came and went. It's just not big on anyone's radar. No one's saying like, man, you really got to check out The Informant. Yeah. I was blown away not only because though how good it was, but also because the trailers and ads, I don't feel like, and I'm trying to remember things correctly, and I looked up the trailers and ad. I remember, I don't want to say they weren't great, but they didn't hook me, and I didn't feel like I was interested in the movie. Going back to what we're saying about tone, this is a tough movie to sell. Like, it's a true story about corporate malfeasance, but it's a comedy. And not only a comedy, but the trailers made it look, like you said, like a wacky Coen Brothers-esque comedy starring Matt Damon, who at the time really hadn't proven himself to be as funny as we know him to be now.
Yeah, right.
But, having seen it now, I know how well it works. It works perfectly. The tone is great. Damon is hilarious. And the script is very, very good. Burns manages to give you just enough of the details of the scandal to make it digestible and keep the movie going. And he gives you enough of Mark's life to make him feel like a real person.
I have to agree on the script. I mean, how Burns explained lysine price fixing, much less made it funny, is a minor miracle.
There's a sale at Bacharach's. They have those Oscar de la Renta ties that nobody buys. What are they, 2 for 1 for another week? Diagonal bands of color hanging around your neck. They never put the nice Brioni ties on sale. I should just get all my ties in Paris, wear them once or twice and shove them in a duty-free bag. Nobody gets stopped at customs for ties. Toro, that's what the Spanish bullfighters say. But it's also what the Japanese call the high-end tuna sushi, Toro. Raw fish. Who went first on that one? The guy without the grill. I've been to Tokyo. They sell little girl underwear in the vending machines right on the main drag, the Ginza, or whatever. Guys in suits buying used girl panties. How is that okay? He seems like a real good guy. I hope he doesn't mind me calling him Brian instead of Agent Shepard. I might even try Bry out. This must be very different for him. Talking to a guy like me instead of a bank robber or a drug dealer. I could see us fishing or whatever.
Let's talk about the cast of this movie, because talk about inspired. Or was it that Soderbergh was so fatigued from Che that he needed to surround himself with funny people?
I mean, yes, maybe, but like casting so many comedians was a risky choice. I mean, what if they all wanted to ham it up and steal each other's scenes? I mean, I guess that's why they didn't cast Chris Kattan, Chris Farley, Will Ferrell, Jimmy Fallon.
No, I mean, it's funny. He almost did cast Chris Kattan, or was involved in a Chris Kattan vehicle once upon a time.
That's true. That's true. Human Nature. He almost made Human Nature, which would have had Chris Kattan as the monkey boy, and a bullet dodged.
Yes. In the commentary track, Soderbergh said that his aim was to cast as many stand-up comedians as possible. He wanted to get, again, this is him talking, their unique point of view and capture the energy that they'd bring to filming. Again, we joke, but Soderbergh is trying to keep things very casual on this movie. The cast itself is just stacked with one funny person after another. I mean, you already mentioned one, Keir, Tony Hale. Buster from Arrested Development. Great in that. He's done other great things. He plays James Epstein, who's Mark's lawyer. You have Patton Oswalt, who needs no introduction.
Probably because he shows up absolutely everywhere.
He absolutely does.
The ubiquitous Patton Oswalt should be his legal name.
Yes. I saw him last year at the Music Box, as a matter of fact. His movie was I Love You, Dad, I think is what it's called.
Oh, yeah.
It was really good. You've got pre-Community Joel McHale. Community was later that year. Paul F. Tompkins, who's been everywhere. And then, so I'm just going to start listing stand-up. There's a lot. You've got Tom Papa, you've got Rick Overton, you've got Tom Wilson, Bob Zaney. And by the way, the Smothers Brothers.
I think it'd be great if you sung a song all by yourself. How about it, folks? Yeah? Well, you really want to?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what do you want to sing for us?
Well, if I told you what it was, you'd probably say it was controversial and you wouldn't let me do it.
Now,
probably.
Wait a minute. I know what I said earlier, but this is your moment. If your song has a message, sing it. Now, does it have a message?
It certainly does have a message.
Go ahead and sing it.
There was a little man, and he had a funny face, and everybody said, behind his back.
Well, was that it?
Yep, I like to hit him hard and get out quick.
Tommy, that's a stupid song. I never heard of it. I don't know where you got it, but it's stupid.
Oh, yeah? Well,
Yeah, and if I say it's a stupid song, and if you like it, you're stupid.
Oh, yeah?
What's more, you're ignorant.
I'm not arguing about that.
And don't forget my fave, the aforementioned Andy Daly, creator and star of Review, the funniest comedy series you've never seen. Or have you seen that, Mike?
No, I'm sorry. I like Andy Daly. I've just never seen that.
Nobody has seen Review. It is, look it up. I think it's on Amazon Prime, or maybe you have to pay for it. It's one of the funniest comedy shows I have ever seen in my life.
How old? New?
It's not super, let's just say a dozen years old, and fact check it later.
Life. It's literally all we have. But is it any good? I'm a reviewer, but I don't review food, books, or movies. I review life itself.
Hi, producer Kevin here. Just want to give a little bit more context on the show Review. it began airing on Comedy Central in 2014 and ended its run in 2017 with only 3 seasons. But looking more into the show, I have to watch this. Keir, you have sold me on this show. Not only you, but also like just Amazon's like episode descriptions. So like Review is a show about this guy who tries things and then reviews them. And when I say try things, like apparently going by the episode titles, he tries stealing, he tries addiction, he tries prom, he tries sex tape, he tries racism, he tries hunting. Like, what? How? Is this going to be the greatest show I've ever seen? Like, what? It feels like it's going to be an absolutely unhinged version of the Anthropocene Reviewed. And I love the Anthropocene Reviewed because of how it's unhinged in its own John Green way. This, I don't even know where to begin with this. I just have to watch this. Anyways, that's Review, Comedy Central. I'm going to buy the DVD. It's also very unfortunate that it's called Review because it makes it very difficult to look up.
But yeah, looking beyond the comedians, the cast and crew included plenty of Soderbergh regulars too. There's Damon, of course. Soderbergh's pal Eddie Jemison shows up. Clooney is back in a producing role. And the movie was edited, as usual, by Stephen Mirioni. And that mysterious Peter Andrews fella was back as the director of photography. Interesting.
I wonder, maybe get him on the show.
If Soderbergh won't show up, let's ask Andrews.
Yeah. What if we interviewed him as Peter Andrews?
Ooh. Very high concept. But there are also a couple of new faces around this time as well. We already mentioned Scott Z. Burns, who wrote this script and would go on to collaborate with Soderbergh on a number of occasions. We will be discussing those occasions soon enough. But he also has a new composer this time around, which, as we've noted before, doesn't happen very often with Soderbergh.
No, he's basically a Cliff Martinez, David Holmes kind of guy.
Yeah, not in The Informant. For this movie, Soderbergh brought in Marvin Hamlish, who prior to The Informant hadn't worked on a theatrical movie since 1996's The Mirror Has Two Faces. So kind of a surprising choice.
It was, but again, we're back to Che, because while making Che, Soderbergh watched, and I find this hilarious, he watched Woody Allen's 1971 movies, Bananas, to cheer him up. And for those who don't know, Bananas is about a neurotic New Yorker.
Wait. A neurotic New Yorker? Played by Woody Allen in a Woody Allen film? No.
It's true. It's an old one.
Okay. Kind of a deep cut.
Yes. So a neurotic New Yorker, this is where it stands apart. He leaves New York. He goes to Latin American country and gets tangled up in a revolution.
So I actually rewatched this a year or so ago, not for research. I know Woody Allen is problematic these days, but anyway, I was raised on the early comedies of Woody Allen as a kid, and those movies I'm still very fond of, and so there's some comic gold in them. I know he lands differently for different people. My wife, Mariah, can't stand watching him, just finds him creepy. Totally fair. Anyway,
I have a good radar.
I have, yes, exactly. I have a different experience of him. So anyway, so I rewatched Bananas again, and in the opening, in which Howard Cosell provides color commentary on the assassination of a Central American leader, it's just bananas, but it's prescient and it's stunning and it still holds up. It's broad comedy and biting satire.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it since college. Is that the one? Is there the scene that remind me? You'll know it better, where someone tries to poison the dictator and he's grown immune to poison.
Yeah. There's like poison. Yeah, because famously the CIA was trying to poison Castro through his cigars and stuff. So there's like these botched assassination attempts. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I know. I remember enjoying it. I mean, I would revisit it. It exists. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what it is, though, I mean, it's like the anti-Che.
Yes, very much.
Clearly inspired by Che. You know, like you said, it's taking things from history, stuff that's talked about. I mean, still very timely at that time that Bananas was made, but it's just a comedic, goofy version of the proceedings of Che himself, of that whole situation. But most importantly and most relevant for us, the score was composed by Marvin Hamlish. And Soderbergh had him on the brain and thought he'd be a great fit. And as luck would have it, despite Hamlish not having worked in film for over a decade, Hamlish was actually looking for that type of work. He had just told his agent that. So the pieces fit. And the score, I think, is really great. It adds the right amount of classic goofiness. It fits perfectly for what Soderbergh was after. And he said, in fact, that he was looking for something that was similar to Neil Simon's The Goodbye Girl.
Yeah, it's so, for some reason, it's such an inspired choice because, yeah, it has that kind of like 60s screwball goofiness, even though the movie isn't shot in that way at all. It just, again, it adds up to that tone somehow. And how Soderbergh knew that would be the right choice kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to pinpoint him, even just, having watched, I'm sure he watches many, many movies, but having watched Bananas and thought like, this guy, and he hadn't worked, and the last work he had done was a drama, you know? Yeah, I mean, it worked well. And again, Soderbergh wanted anything but Che.
Yeah, I'm kind of restless as a person, and I'm certainly restless ideologically. I'm acquisitive in terms of I'm an acquisitive person in terms of new experiences and new ideas, and I like being exposed to different kinds of people in different situations, and I like being in a situation work-wise where I feel that this film that we're making now is kind of in absolute opposition to the thing that we did before. That's just me. That's just the way that I am. I don't know where that comes from. My father was sort of a workaholic, and very, very much a believer that that evolution requires effort. That you don't evolve without putting some effort into gaining new knowledge. So I think that's all it is. I feel like I'm a better filmmaker than I was 20 years ago. I know I am. I can do things now that I couldn't do then, and so that's you got to work at that.
Going back to performance, let's talk about Matt Damon, because I think he's terrific in this movie. I think he's terrific in most everything he does, and he's done so much, and his filmography, like Soderbergh's, is really eclectic.
That's an excellent point, Mike. I mean, Damon can be so culturally ubiquitous and so willing to poke fun at himself that sometimes I think people don't take him seriously enough. But the man, despite always being recognizably Matt Damon, has range. He has nearly 100 acting credits on IMDb, and boy, are they varied. He plays a towny wunderkind in Good Will Hunting, an amnesiac action hero in the Bourne movies, a frazzled astronaut in The Martian, a chilling psychopath in The Talented Mr. Ripley, a doofus pickpocket in the Ocean's movies, a senator with a large penis in Drive Away Dolls, recently. I could go on, and that's not even mentioning his many offbeat cameos. I mean, let's just say he's no Ben Affleck.
No, he's... Aw.
Sorry,
if only we
Ben.
could insert like a photo as a podcast of Ben Affleck smoking on a balcony somewhere. Although, you know what? I am a Ben Affleck fan. I love Ben Affleck.
You're in the Affleck camp?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know if there's a Ben Affleck, Matt Damon divide. Like, you can't love them both because they're so...
Yeah.
They're such a team, but I like Ben Affleck. I think when Ben Affleck's on, he's great. And I think some of those movies he's directed have been really good too.
He's probably somewhat underrated. I think partly because of his public persona and some of the tabloid stuff that just makes him look kind of lame or sad or something. But yeah, he's done some good stuff. I think he doesn't nearly have the talent or the range of Damon, but yeah, he's done good work.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I would agree with that. I mean, digging even deeper to recent stuff that Damon has done, like he played the sports marketing executive Sonny Vicario in Air, which him and Affleck wrote, I believe, right?
I think Affleck directed that.
He directed, and I think I feel like they wrote it. I'd have to look it up. Or the adaptation, whatever it is. But anyway, and he also played General Leslie Groves in Oppenheimer, and I thought he was great. He was really good in that.
Right. Like he can do this comic, idiocy stuff, but then he can turn around and like have real authority and weight, as this military character. Yeah. I mean, obviously actors should have range, but as we know, not all do.
No, they don't. And he does a lot. He does a lot of varied stuff. We can list more and more movies and more interesting things that he did. I mean, Talented Mr. Ripley, which we've somehow mentioned twice on this episode. I mean, his performance in that, and he was
pretty young then. Yeah.
Very young. Was excellent.
I like your point, like that comparison to Soderbergh. Like Soderbergh, Damon doesn't seem to get the credit he deserves. Granted, Soderbergh has won an Oscar, beating himself out for the Oscar. Launched one of the most successful franchises of the century with Ocean's 11, and has made many classics. And yet, he's not considered an auteur or a towering artistic figure in the same way that Paul Thomas Anderson or David Fincher or Jordan Peele are considered auteurs.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the same thing with Damon. He's also an Oscar winner. I mean, not for acting, but for writing Good Will Hunting. And he probably, for most people, I would say, wouldn't be considered like an actor's actor the way Joaquin Phoenix is, or Daniel Day-Lewis, or say the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman. And I find it especially interesting because Damon and Soderbergh share so much in common. They both have a workmanlike approach to their craft. They work often, they work regularly, and they rarely boast themselves as, being capital A artists. Like you said yourself, like Damon will poke fun at himself. Like he has fun with what he's doing. Soderbergh too.
Yeah. I mean, and they're both obviously very, very successful, but it is just interesting the way our culture doesn't lionize generalists in the same way as artists who do the same thing or a version of the same thing over and over.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's a great point and a great way to put it. Like that is a big key into the perception of both of them. And again, I found Damon to be fantastic in this movie. I'd even argue, and I don't know if we're entering hot take territory, but I would argue that he deserved a Best Actor nomination, maybe not a win, but a Best Actor nomination that year, especially seeing that the other nominees included Brad Pitt for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Frank Langella for Frost Nixon. Now, I love both actors, and I think they were both good. Langella was kind of just doing a Nixon thing.
Yeah.
I always have problems with biopic, even though Mark Whitaker's a biopic. He's not impersonating Mark Whitaker. Nobody knows who that is. It's different, when you're playing, Nixon as opposed to whatever. And Benjamin Button, now I think with the luxury of time at the moment, we're like, wow, David Fincher making this like big budget, kind of Forrest Gumpish movie, and it was exciting, and it was good. And I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but I think now we look back at it and be like, ooh, Benjamin Button's not great.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that's a great take. I think a nomination would have been more than fair.
I agree.
Who did you tell?
What?
Who else did you tell about the raid?
Well, I had to tell my secretary. Guys, I'm the head of the bioproducts division. She has to know where to get in touch with me. I told her months ago. So all I said was, Liz, I'm doing some work with the FBI. I might be out of touch for a while. That's it. She had no idea about our case.
We mentioned before, many episodes ago, that Soderbergh is obsessed with outsiders and underdogs. And you could say, because of how understated they are about their work, how it's all about the craft to them, Soderbergh and Damon are, in a way, Hollywood outsiders. I say that with a grain of salt because they're both A-listers, we get it, especially Damon, but these are artists who don't seem to get the recognition they deserve because they make it look easy. Soderbergh's directing, as we've said time and time again, calls very little attention to itself, sometimes no attention to itself. Damon's performances are so natural that you don't really notice the performance at all. I would say that in itself is a remarkable feat for both of them.
And digging even deeper, I mean, here you have Soderbergh and Damon joining forces to make a movie about an underdog. Mark Whitaker, without question, is an underdog and an outsider. I mean, yes, he did embezzle millions of dollars, but he also blew the whistle on one of the largest corporate scams of all time. He risked and lost everything working as an FBI mole so the truth could be exposed. And again, sure, his justification for his role as a whistleblower is certainly self-serving, but it's still a role he saw through to the end. And what he had uncovered had tremendous implications. And then ultimately, you know, because of his self-delusion, he thought he was going to end up at the top of the company, which is kind of ludicrous. But ultimately, he ended up completely outside that company that he wanted to lead.
Yeah. And I wonder, and I guess, again, this fits into the category of the many things we'll never know about Mark Whitaker. It was never determined from the knowledge I gained from the commentary from Scott C. Burns, who obviously read Eichenwald's book and did his own research. And an interesting tidbit, an aside, is Steven Soderbergh never met any of these people. Like he said it intentionally, again, I probably said the Che thing, like when he did Aaron Brockovich, he met Aaron Brockovich, he met the Albert Finney character, he met all the real life people, had many discussions with them, did his own kind of research at the same time. Same thing with Che. We noted that he went and found some of Che's comrades that were still alive and went and spoke to them, and Del Toro did the same thing. But for The Informant, he didn't do anything. He met nobody. He never even met Whitaker.
Yeah.
And that was, he had his reasons, and part of it was like he didn't want to be influenced and he didn't want to, you know, be swayed, especially with somebody like Mark Whitaker.
Yeah. Good call.
Yeah, but like, I think it's also an echo of like, I don't want to do that this time. I just don't, I'm just not doing that.
Yeah.
The point being is that Burns did this research, and it's never clear. So the beginning of the movie, remember, there's the like the virus that's eating the lysine or whatever the case, but there's something wrong with production, and the whole thing is like, fix it, Mark.
Yeah.
Now there's some people who say that Mark actually started the virus, and he was doing it. This is crazy. He was doing it like whatever the Japanese businessman's name, whoever that, I forget his name, that character.
This recurring character.
Right. If he did exist, he was not like, so he offers in the movie, he's like, hey, I know who the mole is. I know who's poisoning your well, and I'll give it to you. I'll give you the name for $10 million. So either that person, I forget, either didn't exist totally, completely, or he did exist. And Whitaker said that he was making this basically not blackmail, but this deal. But that never was true, that it was Whitaker who was behind it, and it was Whitaker who was trying to scam the company for $10 million. And the idea, and stick with me, because I know it's going for a while, the idea is that like that went bad because the FBI got involved, which he didn't expect. So that began the cascading lies, and he started to tell turn informant to the FBI to take the attention off himself.
That was certainly my interpretation, because he is like he's a bad fit as an executive. He says in the movie, like, I'm a biochemist, like I'm learning this whole business stuff. They're making me learn this stuff. I'm more comfortable with the science or whatever. So if he's the biochemist, like he should have been able to troubleshoot the lysine problem. My interpretation of it was definitely that, like, yeah, he had sabotaged it in order to not present himself as the hero, but it's classic embezzlement. You create a third party who the payment is made to. So he comes up with this Japanese businessman who says, I know the identity of the mole inside Archer Daniels Midland, and for $10 million or whatever the price was, I will reveal to you the identity of the mole, and I will give you this new super strain of lysine that is resistant to the virus, and it'll solve your problems. And so Whitaker takes this to his boss, who you might expect his boss to say, well, I need more to go on than that. But instead his boss says, well, see how low you can get him to go. Try to get a few $1 million less, and then we'll just go ahead and do it, because that wasn't apparently that shocking of an amount of money to them.
No, it's like the end of Burn After Reading, where they're like, whatever, just pay him.
Yeah.
She wants surgery. Fuck it, do it. Like, just get rid of them, But yeah, I that's one thing though, I assume the same. I think that's widely assumed. But that's one of the things that he's never admitted to.
Right. And we don't, we don't ultimately know the truth. Maybe partly because we haven't read that book yet. I did kind of add it to my wish list. I would love to read it because I always want to read every bit of source material for every one of these movies. But frankly, as much research as we do, we don't always have time to read a 500-page book before we record a podcast episode.
Yeah, I heard it's very big. I like Eichenwald as a writer.
Yeah.
He's a really good writer, but I hear the book is very big and not funny. So, Keir, you had a book come out at the end of January, and we've hardly even talked about it.
Mike, I thought you'd never ask. The book in question is called The Royal Game by Linda Keir.
You don't look like a Linda.
This is the fourth book I've published with my co-author, Linda Jaffe Hull. We write under the pen name Linda Keir, mainly so no one accidentally gives one of our books to fans of my children's books.
Sounds spicy. What's The Royal Game about?
Jenny Jensen, a young pop singer from Peoria, Illinois, is playing a show in Europe when she has a meet cute with a guy who looks vaguely familiar and turns out to be Prince Hugh, heir to the British throne. After a whirlwind romance, Hugh proposes and they get engaged. Then Jenny learns that Hugh's mom, Princess Penelope, who everyone believes died in a tragic accident, may actually have been murdered. And when Jenny starts getting threatening notes from inside the palace, she believes she has to solve the mystery if she doesn't want to die next.
But Keir, not only are you not named Linda, you're not a young pop singer from Peoria, Illinois. And as far as I know, you've never been engaged to royalty.
There's a lot about me you don't know, Mike. And yes, I know it sounds like an unlikely project for a guy who grew up in Montana, but I try to find and apply the approach every story requires.
So basically, you ask yourself, what would Soderbergh do?
Those words are tattooed across my shoulder blades above a photorealistic picture of Channing Tatum as Magic Mike.
There's really is a lot that I don't know about you, Keir.
The Royal Game is a mystery spiced with romance, kind of like me.
Exactly, yes. And it sounds like a great beach read or a book club selection.
You hit the nail on the head. And Linda and I love talking to book clubs. Readers, feel free to get in touch. You can find the book anywhere books are sold, but you can order signed, personalized copies from the Filmographers' favorite bookstore, Exile in Bookville. Find them online at exileinbookville.com or look for the link in our show notes.
Let's talk about reception, Keir, which was, like the movie itself, odd. Critically, it did really well. Kim Newman, a writer that I really enjoy, gave it a positive review in Empire magazine, noting how it was not nearly as pompous as similar films, and he said that Damon's work should cement him as a star character actor. No argument from us, Kim. Our guy, Michael Phillips from the Chicago Tribune, also praised Damon, saying, quote, Damon's voice and demeanor are just right, and the actor, who really is an actor, a good one, works out Whitaker's particularities like a character man stepping into a leading role rather than a movie star slumming. End quote.
Nicely said.
Yeah, I love that. We're just really, Matt Damon should listen to this episode. He will feel great. Peter Rayner of the Christian Science Monitor said, quote, Damon is an agile comic performer and Soderbergh knows how to serve him up without losing sight of the ultimate seriousness behind it all. Quote. Tasha Robinson of the AV Club liked it, as did Chris Wagner of the Dallas Morning Star, Christopher Orr of the New Republic, and, hold on to your butts, Manola Dargis of the New York Times enjoyed it, though tone deaf as ever. She notes that anger fuels the movie's laughs and can't help herself from saying, quote, like all of Mr. Soderbergh's movies, this one can be appreciated on pure formal terms for the clarity of its images and the economy of storytelling. Quote. Steven Soderbergh, that stuffy academic, is at it again. Even his attempts at humor are inversions of anger and nothing more than formal exercises. Keir, one's eyes cannot roll hard enough.
Oh my God. It's hard to know what to say about that. It's weird. It's also weird how Manola Dargis has replaced Jonathan Rosenbaum as our comic foil. Wait, or is she our straight man? Either way, it's somewhat alarming how often she misses the point. That's just a baffling take. Mike, you mentioned that the reception to this movie was odd, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this, given the movie's unusual tone. But while critics liked The Informant, audiences did not. On Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score sits at just 44%, with most viewers either bored, confused, or unable to connect to the movie's tone. In a way, this does kind of make sense. I mean, the comedy is very broad and classic in a way, like 1970s Woody Allen or the Smothers Brothers, or even as far back as Preston Sturges and Billy Wilder. I think that despite his comic turn in the Ocean's movies, audiences just weren't expecting the man who is Jason Bourne to play a deceitful, nerdy executive, maybe. And, as fun as this movie is, when we put it into the context of its release in 2009, it probably tracks that audiences would have a hard time connecting with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think also something that is worth mentioning that I just thought of now, like, I feel like there was like a few, this is post, Fargo, Oh Brother, We're Out There. I believe Oh Brother is 2006, I think. If I'm not, it's not after this, but I feel like there's a couple Coen brother knockoffs around this time. And I'm not saying this is a knockoff, but I mean, optically it can feel like one.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them were very successful.
Yeah.
I don't think that you can, even the Coen brothers have struggles breaking into that market, and they are the market.
Yeah.
So put that in a context too, that it was also competing like Leatherheads, I'd have to look, was around that time, which was a Clooney Soderbergh thing, which we've already talked about in the movies that Soderbergh didn't make. So there's a weird period where this type of movie is being made and just not finding success with audiences.
Yeah. And like I said, like this one is, I mean, it's genius, but it's not as immediately, like its pleasures aren't, they don't hit you over the head quite as hard.
No, it's a challenging sell, and that brings us to its box office performance. So this movie, thankfully, is the easiest Soderbergh movie we've had to decipher in a long time. It's been hard to make heads or tails of, like, was Bubbles successful or was Chase successful? After those experimental releases, The Girlfriend Experiment included, and The Informant is a movie that received a standard theatrical release, and it did okay. I mean, it had a reported budget of $22 million and made $33 million domestically and $8 million internationally, for a total of nearly $42 million. It made $10 million. Its opening weekend, landing in second place behind Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, which grossed $30 million that weekend. And it held pretty well in its second weekend, bringing in $6 million with a mere 36% drop, which isn't bad. Usually first to second weekend drops are 50 to 60%.
Yeah.
So,
and opening against a movie that's, like an animated kids flick, it's clearly differentiated itself as adult fare. So that probably helps.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Now, the bad thing, the unfortunate thing, is that it dropped to 9th place in the top 10 by its third weekend, grossing just $3.6 million, and it fell off from there. Now, 33 million, domestic isn't bad, but I think the lack of international business is what really hurt it in the long run.
I wonder if it was hard to sell, French sophisticates on a movie set in Decatur, Illinois.
Not only set in Decatur, Illinois, but filmed in Decatur, Illinois.
Right.
We were talking about, I can't believe we didn't put this in our script. They filmed at the Whitaker house.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. They did a little movie magic to, I guess the horse barn that he built was a little further down the road, so it wouldn't have been shot from his porch. So that's movie magic there. But yeah, it's Matt Damon is playing Mark Whitaker in Whitaker's own front yard and at his house.
Yeah. Scott Bakula's FBI agent. That when they shot him in his office, that was the agent's office, and you can see ADM through the window. Wow. Yeah. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. I wonder if, I guess the big question is if Whitaker still lived there at the time.
I think he did, which is weird. Although, he was probably in prison by then, but like maybe his wife still lived there.
Oh, right. Yeah, I guess. Huh. Yeah, I guess that's something to look up. Maybe they got some money.
Yeah, could have used that. But yeah, that is so fascinating. And meth capital of Illinois aside, I mean, still a lot friendlier place to shoot, than the jungles where they shot Che, right?
Probably, just a little. Getting back to his performance, though, unlike a fair amount of Soderbergh's movies, this one is available on Blu-ray and it's still in print. So maybe DVD sales were able to get it, over the hump and nudge it just barely into the black, but it would be just barely.
So it's another Soderbergh movie that you can't really call a slam dunk. I mean, I hate saying this, but if you take away the Ocean's movies, Soderbergh really hadn't had a hit movie since Traffic in 2000. Because after Traffic, and again, this is all non-Ocean's movies, you have Full Frontal, Solaris, Bubble, The Good German, Che, The Girlfriend Experience, and now The Informant, which is, in box office terms, that's kind of a tough run.
Yeah, it really is. Like we've said before, there's some that are kind of nebulously maybe did okay, but nothing in there that's a box office success.
Yeah.
But I think we'd agree, you and I, that this is one of his most creatively interesting runs. These are movies that, I mean, there's nothing in here that Full Frontal. I was say we really dislike, but you like Full Frontal. You like Full Frontal a lot. But these are all movies I think we at least find interesting at the very least, and some we love, like Good German and The Bubble. Like he's doing some varied, interesting, experimental stuff, and it's just not connecting with audiences. Although with his next movie, which will be next time on the Filmographers, he's going to once again, at long last, have his creative cake and financially eat it too, or I don't know. I actually don't know where I was going with that. He's gonna do good things. Money.
It's gonna be good.
Yeah,
it's gonna be good. Listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe on your platform of choice and help us spread the word. Tell your film-loving friends about us, share our episodes on social media, and be sure to give us a good rating or review. Those ratings truly make a big difference.
If you really want to show your support and help us keep doing more deep dives into directors' filmographies, find us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. Every dollar makes it easier for us to produce this show and share our passion for movies with you. Thank you in advance.
And thanks, as always, to Kevin Lau, our producer, Gompson, who composed and played our theme music, and Cosmo Graff, who designed our logo.
Join us next week on the Filmographers podcast when we'll discuss Soderbergh's adventures in being terrifyingly prescient.
Wait, he knew about J.D. Vance's attempt to order donuts?
Well, he might have. He might have, but he was right about something a little more scary, something that kept many of us inside for too long. But it also gave us plenty of time to watch this movie, assuming you had the stomach for it.